Pokemon Z, or what's become of it, is the 2019 Switch game we have been promised, or so that's my short answer. But if you want the long, follow me into my secret room and I'll make sense of the conspiracy wall inside. Let's start quickly with the evidence. 1. Junichi Masuda has not officially directed a Pokemon game since X and Y. Every time this has happened, he has put someone else in charge of games like Emerald, Heart Gold, and Soul Silver, Platinum, and Black 2 and White 2. 2. Going as far back as Black 1 and White 1, Junichi Masuda has stated how long Pokemon games were in production up until X and Y on a blog called Hidden Power. Black 1 and White 1 took 4 years and X and Y took 3.5. Dates that line up nicely with the Japanese releases of Diamond and Pearl and Black 1 and White 1. 3. There's not only confirmation that Junichi Masuda has been planning a simultaneous world release 7 years before X and Y's launch, but that X and Y's production began about 3 years before the release of Black 1 and White 1. And Orez's production, for Shigeru Omori, began on 2012, November 21st. And the production on Sun and Moon began autumn 2013, as soon as they finished working on X and Y. 4. To this day, another loose end that has yet to be addressed is the hinting of Southern Kalos. Much like how Sinnoh is split in two by Mount Coronet's mountain range, because what we've seen of Kalos has only accounted for the northern half of France, it's entirely possible that Southern Kalos is south of the mountain range. 5. According to Junichi Masuda, Black 2 and White 2 didn't start production until after the Game Freak staff had played through Black 1 and White 1, while Junichi Masuda said the idea for X and Y first arose around June 2010. 6. At the 2016 E3 demonstration, and in the later translated interview, Junichi Masuda confirms that he passed on the role of director to Shigeru Omori while thinking of the future of Pokemon, and while Mr. Omori stated at E3 he oversaw the entire development of the game, the aforementioned interview claims he was given the role for his work as director on Orez, which lines up with the claim that Shigeru Omori didn't become involved until quite a bit of progress. But, in spite of this, Omori was the one who chose Hawaii. 7. At the 2018 Pokemon Let's Go demonstration, Junichi Masuda was present, but Shigeru Omori was absent. 8. In Iwata asks for Black 1 and White 1, considering the massive changes that were made for Pokemon, Mr. Iwata asks Ken Sugimori and Junichi Masuda what they think should not be changed for them to not cease being Pokemon games. Ken Sugimori stated that beginning with a professor speaking to you and having a certain down-to-earth characteristic were essential, while Junichi Masuda explained that before passing Sky Arrow Bridge, he believed without explaining in an orderly fashion what the Pokedex is, that there are gyms or Pokemon centers, and so on, the games would stop feeling like a Pokemon game, and that this is done to help players fit into the world as soon as possible. So in case you hadn't figured it out, I believe the 2019 game will see us return to Kalos, but starting from the southern half. How integral Zygarde will be is unclear. It could either be seen throughout the Kalos region, or be relegated to a post-game episode as we've had since X and Y, and up to Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. But why 6 years later? You may be wondering. Well, based on Mr. Masuda's comments, it would be late 2014 that he would be thinking about the future of Pokemon. Roughly 5 years down the line at that point, which is a stock question when thinking about the future. In all but a direct answer, Mr. Masuda implies he was the original director of Sun and Moon until he passed the role on to Mr. Omori following his work on Orez. Since the first part is the most important and Kukui's introduction transitions immediately to Lily trying to escape the Aether Foundation with Nebby, there is a possibility that Junichi came up with the idea of Kukui, Lily, and by extension Lusamine, as she is the villain who wants to use Cosmog to her own ends. If this is true, the base idea for these characters were given to Mr. Omori to be expanded upon and brought to life starting in late 2014. Since the production of Sun and Moon ended late 2016, I believe this would be the point where Mr. Masuda began production of Let's Go, using the engine for the 2019 game, and handed the role of director for the 2019 game to Mr. Omori, explaining his absence at E3 2018 and Junichi's presence on both occasions. It's a bit unclear the exact production time of Orez, as Mr. Omori has only told us when he joined, but given what has been stated for production length and their relation to release dates of games, a timeline of what's going on can be made. In the past, Diamond and Pearl and X and Y were the first games for the systems, and it shows. While Diamond and Pearl are infamous for being slow, especially during the surfing segments compared to Platinum, X and Y surfing, roller skates, and the new experience share made it so players could breeze right through the game. But if one compares the characters and story, there's a closer overlap. Beyond Cyrus, from Diamond and Pearl, and Lysandra wishing for the same thing, but tackling it from two different angles that correspond to the region's legendary Pokemon and being well-intentioned extremists. While it's certainly not anything to be surprised about with Diamond and Pearl, being after the Unova games, and especially with the knowledge that ideas for X and Y began before the end cycle of Black 1 and White 1, the gym leaders being less developed with focus on Viola, Grant, Karina, and Wulfric being the most apparent with only details seen in their concept art and only mentioned by the Gym Freaks show, and certain tourists make it seem like much more could have been done with them and thus don't make them age as well. And once again, this is a complaint that could be raised with Diamond and Pearl in hindsight, as opposed to at the time, with Rourke, Gardena, Fantina, Byron, and Candace getting the most focus on. Which isn't saying much, but it's also roughly what every college gym leader besides Karina gets. But even then, it could be argued that where it did focus its time, it was much more decent than where X and Y spent it. The commanders, your rival, and Cyrus are pretty much what you might expect at the time, and while things do end abruptly, there is still time given to explaining, or at least strongly suggesting, what it might have happened if you talk to Saturn, even if Platinum is leagues above it. The only Flare scientist that gets more attention on them is Zerosic. Your main rival is at least decently written for what they are, but Tyranno's character arc, if you even want to call it that, effectively ends at Shalor, and Shauna barely manages to defend the world of Kalos any better, with Trevor only being a close second to your rival. So both from Platinum and an actual dissection of X and Y, there's reason to believe these games could have been better. This is why I think leading with Let's Go as opposed to the 2019 game is ultimately the better decision. Plus, it also gives Mr. Amore an extra year to flesh things out properly. Once again, looking at the timeline, something should be noted which is potentially going to make people all the more annoyed with Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. Based on the timeline, it took about 2 years for Platinum to be created, and if Mr. Masuda is to be believed, that's about the same amount of time it took to make Black 2 and White 2. As a result, it's basically impossible to deny that Pokemon Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon was always planned to be released a year after Sun and Moon. That being said, I can't say this is really a glass half full outlook, but I would say this was planned from the outset sometime around late 2014. Considering the dates and certain changes, it can be speculated both Pokemon Platinum and Heart Gold and Soul Silver were meant to complement Black 1 and White 1. Not only does Cynthia's mention of Giratina suggest they followed Platinum, but Cynthia's knowledge of Arceus and Giratina at the Sinjoh Ruins which suggests that Heart Gold and Soul Silver take place roughly around the same time period. I would say it was roughly around the release of Black 1 and White 1 that Junichi Masuda started to devise this plan with Black 2 and White 2, and X and Y being in production at the same time, and Auras beginning production sometime after the former, while the latter was already halfway done. So where is this all going exactly? The reason Let's Go has a lot of people saying right is because of the trend that people have caught on to. An increasingly infamous interview that I've brought up in the past via an article called The Methodical Destruction of Pokemon in Black 1 and White 1 had Junichi Masuda and Ken Sugimori from that same interview I mentioned earlier. In that interview, they mentioned how Diamond and Pearl was once labeled the grand culmination of all the games that had gone before, while Black 1 and White 1 were the first grand experiment of what made a Pokemon game and what could be changed without taking away that feeling. From the story alone, it is clear Mr. Masuda wanted to explore a variety of things, but at the same time, it's not Pokemon's place to give a clear answer, let alone Pokemon Black and White's, which focus on ideals and the truth that vary from person to person and Pokemon to Pokemon, or X and Y's philosophy that somewhere extremely different ways of thinking intersect if those ways of thinking are just on a different axis, which in that sense make them the perfect logical next step. And from there, that we may think differently but we all live on the same planet, Pokemon Sun and Moon makes sense as the next step from X and Y, not just by how these two things make our lives possible, but how each other's influence on one another changes us slowly but surely, be it for better or worse. So this is how it goes. Every person in Pokemon have different ideals and understand the truth differently. The differences can sometimes make it seem like people are thinking in completely different dimensions from one another, but somewhere they overlap. It is through this interaction that we influence one another little by little, which help us grow as individuals. Maybe I'm missing a step here, but it would seem the next logical step would either be the final product people have become through such interactions, or the result of this interaction on a generational scale. Personally, the latter sounds like step 5, but the former might not be complex enough for the next theme. It could also be argued with 23 years, the 25th anniversary would deal with the macro scale. But it's not just the theme, but what are shown in these games. I would say things began with Black 1 and White 1, but Platinum and Heart Gold and Silver were a prologue of sorts. The devil's in the details. Pokemon and Diamond Pearl were once labeled the grand culmination of all the games that had gone before. In my opinion, Platinum took that label by the time of the interview, and Heart Gold and Soul Silver was the grand send-off from the tiny setting of the Japan Islands, allowing people to visit Johto and Kanto while also connecting Hoenn and Sinnoh to this region as well. And not in a superficial way either, but through actual history of the blending of the four cultures. Black 1 and White 1, through the themes alone, have become the start of a new series of stories. The tales of Unova, Kalos, and Alola that have experimented with what a Pokemon game is, what is necessary, how Pokemon can continue to evolve over the coming years, and what Pokemon even are. For Pokemon 2019 to be the grand culmination of the last 9 to 13 years, the final tweaks have to be made with Let's Go. Or at least Let's Go must take the place of Diamond and Pearl and X and Y as far as the first game for the Switch goes. Pokemon Z is the version where everything eventually intersects. And while it might not be the final chapter, which I believe is the 25th anniversary game, it's still important to get this one absolutely right. That story began with Black 1 and White 1, and Black 2 and White 2 is to X and Y what Platinum was to Black 1 and White 1, just in the same way that Auras is to Sun and Moon. But the theme is not broken. Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon is this to the 2019 games, with Let's Go being like Heart Gold and Soul Silver. That's my prediction, and I think I've actually got this one right. The story began when twin heroes and a single dragon brought the Unova region into being, but whose sons destroyed the region as a result of the dragon splitting in two. Almost everyone knows where this goes, but how it all ties in is a completely different matter. Black 2 and White 2 explored the history of the region known as Unova to reveal that it was not only connected to Hoenn through the underground ruins, and Sinnoh through the Lake of Being, Dragon Spiral's set of orbs, and Abyssal Ruins' elemental plates, but later on connected to Kalos through Tornadus, Thundurus, and Landorus' connection to Reflection Cave, and Kalos' connection to Unova through the Reshiram and Zekrom statues, and Johto through the Sea Spirit's Den, and debatably the 1500-year-old Lavray tree. But Black 2 and White 2 were also where we focused on the first tale, of Kyurem and what became of the hero's lineage, which is strongly speculated to have eventually resulted in both N and Ghetsis, through N's power that mirror what is written in Abyssal Ruins, but also by a single name N was given by Ghetsis, Harmonia. But to this day, that has not been proven beyond that would complete the story. The next story in the series was about two brothers, a single Pokemon, and a machine. Yes, I am talking about AZ, his brother, his Fluette, and the ultimate weapon. In Black 1 and White 1, the description of the relic items confirmed the civilization they were used in was about 3,000 years ago, while, verbatim, the story having to do with AZ's brother is exactly 3,000 years ago. AZ left the Unova region's Relic Castle, home to Pokemon with a move that may mean they're from space, but with one, specifically 23,000 years old, brought to life. Juniper not only states the Darmanitan there to be around 25,000 years old, but the Golett of Dragon Spiral have such a similar story to Claydol, and also being made of clay, that Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon made them version-exclusive counterparts. And wouldn't you know it, Golett and the Sigilyph, a Pokemon said to never vary route, are both found on Colossus Route 10, right next to Geosenge, where AZ's brother buried the ultimate weapon, and AZ has a Sigilyph and Golurk on his team. You cannot get any closer to this being the case than that. At least in my opinion. But this is where I'd say the next story that intersects with AZ's story begins on two fronts. And it all begins in a world far, far away in time and space, when an ethereal dragon first loses its light and that light rains down upon the world. That light was an energy that makes Pokemon much larger and can make them much more powerful, corrupting two powerful Pokemon of land and sea. Yes! I am saying that natural energy is Necrozma's light, or as is in reality the bridge between X and Y and Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. Based on what we know of the Sea Folk in Sun and Moon, it's not hard to conclude these people are descendants of Pacifilog, the place where people of the Regi and the Dragon tribe of Meteor Falls connected through Sky Pillar and the Sealed Chamber. Alola would have existed regardless, but many Kalos Pokemon wouldn't if a certain tall man from Kalos hadn't seen a green Pokemon transform and a meteor hadn't created a crater before the crater was to be formed by an underwater volcano. And this is where stories 2, 3, and 4 overlap in Sun and Moon. Let's not beat around the bush. The main character of Sun and Moon is Lily, and the main villain is without a shred of doubt her mother, Lusamine. What did I say about Lusamine earlier? Junichi Masuda, when asked about the story of Pokemon X and Y, said this. And once again, said by Mr. Masuda, if Shigeru Mori had come up with Lusamine, this possibility might be less likely, but if Junichi Masuda came up with it, the possibility increases. Lysandra is the father of Lusamine, and I will dive more into that in the second half of this topic.